Today's recipe calls for peanut butter. I'm going to show you how to make ooey, gooey, chocolatey, chewy peanut butter brownies. They're not so much chewy, but more fudgy. But anyways, they're delicious. So with that said, let's get started.
The first thing we need to do is melt 1 cup or 227 grams of unsalted butter in a small sized saucepan. Gently toss the holding device over your heat source. Crank the heat level to a medium-low. Keep an eye on the butter and give it the occasional stir-up. If you don't have the patience to wait for it to melt, it helps to cube it up so it melts faster. After the solid gold bars have turned into a liquid gold, take the butter off the heat. To the warm butter, you'll add half a cup or 87 grams of semi-sweet chocolate chips. Really whisk your face off to bring these two ingredients together. At first, it'll seem like you did something wrong, but with enough effort, everything will come together and the chocolate will melt in the butter. To the chocolate flavored butter, we'll add 1 teaspoon of instant espresso powder. This will help intensify the chocolate flavor. Give that a good whisk in. It's best to add it while the butter is warm. Doing so will help bloom the espresso to extract more flavor from it. Once you have all that mixed up, we'll set it aside to let it slightly cool down while we get the rest of the goods ready. Transfer it to a large holding device they call a bowl. Scrape your pan clean to get all the goods. In a different medium-sized bowl, we'll combine all of our dry goods together. First, add 1 1/4 cup or 150 grams of all-purpose flour. Next, add half a cup or 50 grams of unsweetened cocoa powder. Sift everything together and push through any clumps that are left behind. Cocoa powder is notorious for being lumpy and clumpy, so doing this extra step will help ensure it'll be well mixed with the other ingredients. The last thing we need to add to the bowl is 1 teaspoon of kosher salt. Lightly whisk your face off to combine all the dry goods into one dusty mix-up. Now that the butter has slightly cooled, we can add the rest of the wet ingredients to the bowl. First, add 1 cup or 200 grams of granulated sugar. Next, add 200 grams or 1 cup that has been firmly packed with dark brown sugar. Give that a quick mix to incorporate the sugars with the melted chocolate and butter. Following all that business, add in 3 large room temperature eggs. It's best practice to crack them in a separate container to prevent the adage of shells. After the eggs, add in 1 tablespoon of vanilla extract. Once you've added the flavor additive, whisk like you've never whisked before. When you first start, you'll notice the batter is grainy and lumpy looking because of all the sugar. In the end, you should have a nice and smooth consistency. Whisking really well will dissolve the sugar with the liquid ingredients. It's best to have it smoothed out now before we add the flour. Before we get too much farther into our science experiment, we can start preheating the oven box. Set the temp to 350 Fahrenheit or 176 degrees Celsius. Now we can start mixing the dry with the wet. I like mixing the wet into the dry, and I also like to do this in 2 sets. Add the first half and fold it into the wet ingredients. Mix until just barely incorporated in. Once you've done so, add the last half to the bowl. Really mix and fold everything together until you can't see any more of the dry goods. It's best practice to fold from the sides and bottom into the center to achieve the best mix-up. It's also imperative to not overmix your batter. Doing so will create a ton of gluten, which in turn will make our brownies denser and possibly rock hard where they could break a window. We want something that's soft and light in texture. Now that everything is one cohesive thick batter, you'll add half a cup or 87 grams of semi-sweet chocolate chips. Following the chocolate, you'll add half a cup or 110 grams of peanut butter chips. Fold those in using the same techniques we did with the previous ingredients. In the end, you should end up with a thick batter with pieces of chocolate and peanut butter well distributed throughout. Here comes the hardest part of this entire recipe. We need to line an 8 by 8 inch pan. Lightly grease the pan with a little butter. Ensure you get the sides and corners as well. This will help the parchment paper stay in place. Pull yourself enough paper to cover the whole pan. Lay the parchment paper flat on your work surface and then throw your pan on top of that upside down. Grab a pair of kitchen shears and cut the paper starting from the corners and cutting towards the corner of the pan. Cut all the way down until you meet the edge of the pan. Once you've done that, flip everything back over. The paper should be resting on top. Push the paper into the pan, and in theory, it should fit without any issues. If you're like me, you may need to cut a little more of the paper so it'll fit into the corners. The paper should be overlapping itself in the corners. In the end, the paper should fit nice and snug and should take the shape and form of the pan as well. Cut off any of the excess paper. Just keep in mind you want to leave a little behind so you can grab onto it to pull the brownies out. Now that the worst arts and crafts project is over, we can add the batter to the prepped out pan. Add the goods into the center and with a gentle touch, push the batter to the sides and corners. When doing so, you might need to hold the paper in place so it doesn't move around on you too much during this process. Scrape the holding apparatus clean. We don't want to waste any of that sugary goodness. Once you have all the batter in the pan, grab a small offset spatula and lightly grease it with some butter and smooth out the brownie mixture into one nice, even, and smooth layer. The last thing we need to do before we bake the pan of sugar is add some scoops of peanut butter. You'll add half a cup or 135 grams of your favorite style of peanut butter. When adding the butter of peanuts, you want to add scoops that are roughly half a tablespoon to a tablespoon in size. Grab a wooden skewer or a butter knife and swirl the peanut butter into the brownie mix. Give this a few passes until things are barely incorporated. The less you mess with it, the bigger the peanut butter chunks will be in each piece. I got a little lost in the sauce and over swirled mine, which is totally fine because every piece has a little peanut butter in it. To be extra bougie, I added a light sprinkle of some flaky sea salt. This is totally optional, but it gives it a great look and taste in the end. Grab the pan of chocolatey goodness and toss it into the oven. For the best baking results, place the pan on the middle rack of your oven. Set a timer and bake the brownies for 45 minutes or until the center of the brownies do not jiggle as much when you shake and shimmy the pan. Times may vary depending on how hot your oven runs. Once the timer goes off, pull that sweet treat out of the heat. Give it a quick shake to check the center to see that it has set or barely moves when the pan is shaken. Let them hang out in the pan to completely set up and cool all the way down. After they've had time to chill, pull the brownies out of the pan by using the paper to pull them out. Cut these into as big of pieces as your little sugary sweet tooth desires. I will say a little bit goes a long way. In my humble opinion, the smaller the better. If you want to get ultra clean cuts, wipe your blade down with a damp towel. This will clean off any of the gooey chocolate. Eat these warmed up with a glass of milk or with a scoop of ice cream. If you're feeling real crazy, cut a piece in half, put raspberry jam in the middle, put it back together, and make some type of dessert sandwich. Whatever you decide to do, just enjoy.
Alright, now that our peanut butter brownies are done, let's give them the old taste-a-roo. So looking at them, they came out nice and decadent looking. They look super fudgy and like they're going to be gooey and soft and just delicious. Color-wise, there's that nice dark rich chocolate color, and on the top we get that tanness from our peanut butter, so it kind of pops and it kind of offsets it, which is nice. Then you can kind of see some chips throughout, like the chocolate chips and the peanut butter chips, and then on top you can see a little bit of flaky sea salt. Overall they look super good, so let's try it. These things came out super tasty. They're nice and rich and chocolatey and also have that delicious peanut butter flavor to them. It's the perfect combination together, and it's also the perfect ratio of chocolate to peanut butter. They're slightly sweet, but that extra flaky sea salt on top helps counterbalance that and cut through all that richness and sweetness. Texture wise, they're nice and gooey and just super soft. Then that crust on the top, you know, that forms when it bakes, adds a little bit of crunch factor. And I got a corner piece that got nice and hardened and caramelized on the outside to bring even more texture to it. And some of those chips on the inside, the peanut butter ones and the chocolate chip ones that didn't fully melt, add a little bit of crunch factor as well. Overall, these things are just super tasty. These things were super easy and fun to make. Well, besides trying to get the parchment paper to fit in the square pan, that's not so much fun. But anyways, these things are super simple, and you can play around with the peanut butter that you use. Maybe use a roasted honey peanut butter or a crunchy peanut butter to add even more texture to them, or use a brown butter instead of a regular butter, or use some bittersweet chocolate instead of semi-sweet chocolate. Just kind of mix and match and make it taste good all the way around or to your liking. So hopefully you enjoyed today's video. Thanks for watching. I really need to go brush my teeth and find some vegetables to eat so I feel somewhat healthy after eating quite a few of these. So yeah, we'll see you on the next one. Peanut butter, I just ate a piece. Now my mouth is super dry. Super tasty. Tasty? Well, try to make the parchment paper more saltiness. Salty, salty, salty.